The assassin's claws tapped rhythmically against the metal table, the sound echoing in the dimly lit chamber with a cold, metallic reverberation. Anticipation coursed through its veins, sharpening its focus as it waited. It was not impatience but anticipation. The creature, an angular, multi-limbed being with skin like polished obsidian, was known across the galaxy as Sarek, a killer whose name sent shivers through even the most hardened criminals. No target had ever escaped Sarek's blade, and tonight would be no exception. Or so the assassin believed. The hollow display in front of Sarek blinked to life, revealing the face of its latest employer, an aristocratic Tarlon with pale, ridged skin and eyes that gleamed with malice. "Sarek," the Tarlon purred, its voice like silk over steel. "Your target is a human. A Deathworlder. An irritant who has meddled in our operations for the last time." Sarek's mandibles twitched. A Deathworlder. The term alone carried weight across the galaxy. Humans were infamous not just for surviving their chaotic, predator-filled homeworld but for thriving. Their unrelenting tenacity was legendary, like enduring volcanic eruptions to rebuild or navigating uncharted oceans with nothing but the stars as guides. Yet Sarek's confidence didn't waver. "Name?" Sarek rasped, its voice like gravel scraping across stone. "Elena Voss," the Tarlon replied. "She's been interfering with our shipments, sabotaging key installations and rallying local resistance. A nuisance we can no longer afford to tolerate." The hollow display flickered, projecting an image of Elena Voss. Her face was sharp, determined, with piercing eyes that seemed to look right through the projection. Sarek studied the image intently. Humans were smaller and physically weaker than many species, but their reputation for cunning and unpredictability was well earned. "Location?" Sarek inquired. "A remote colony world. Sparse population, harsh conditions. You'll find her coordinating operations from an underground base." Sarek's claws stopped tapping. A harsh colony world? It might pose challenges for some, but Sarek's species, the Drekker, had evolved on a volcanic wasteland. Heat, pressure, and toxic air were challenges it relished. "Payment will be delivered upon confirmation of her death," the Tarlon continued. "Do not fail, Sarek." The assassin's mandibles clicked in amusement. Failure was not in its lexicon. The journey to the colony world was uneventful, though Sarek took the time to review the limited data available on humans. Their physiology was unremarkable by galactic standards: 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head. Soft skin. Average size. Yet they were capable of feats that belied their appearance. Surviving wounds that would fell a Drekker, enduring environmental extremes, and the psychological aspect. Humans were unpredictable, adaptable, and most disturbingly, fiercely loyal. Sarek dismissed the notion as overblown galactic superstition. It had faced unpredictable prey before and prevailed every time. The colony's surface was bleak, a rocky expanse under a sky perpetually shrouded in gray clouds. Sarek's ship landed undetected in a shallow canyon, its matte black hull blending seamlessly with the surroundings. The assassin moved with practiced efficiency, cloaking its form and setting off toward the coordinates provided. The entrance to Elena Voss's base was well hidden, but Sarek's advanced scanners detected the faint energy signature of a concealed hatch. It approached silently, its limbs moving with eerie precision, and began working to disable the lock. As the hatch hissed open, Sarek slipped inside, its optical sensors adjusting instantly to the dim, flickering lights of the base's interior. The corridors were narrow and winding, clearly designed to disorient intruders. But Sarek had encountered such tactics before and was unimpressed. The assassin's scans detected no movement. The base appeared deserted, though its systems hummed faintly, indicating recent activity. The air carried a metallic tang and the temperature was cooler than expected, a deliberate chill that hinted at the calculated nature of the trap. Sarek moved deeper, its blade, a plasma-edged weapon that could cut through nearly anything, held at the ready. The first sign of trouble came in the form of a sound, a low, rhythmic thudding that reverberated through the walls. Sarek paused, its head tilting slightly as it analyzed the noise. Footsteps? No, too irregular. Machinery? Perhaps, but it didn't match any standard patterns. The sound grew louder, closer, and Sarek felt a flicker of unease. Then, without warning, the lights went out, plunging the corridor into darkness. Sarek activated its infrared vision, but even that yielded only shifting shadows and a faint heat signature that moved too quickly to track. So predictable, a voice echoed through the corridor, cool and laced with amusement. "Elena Voss." Sarek's mandibles tightened. The human was toying with it, attempting to unsettle it. But fear was an alien concept to the Drekker. "You will not leave this place alive, human," Sarek growled, its voice reverberating through the empty corridor. "Neither will you," Elena replied, her voice disembodied, bouncing off the walls as if coming from everywhere and nowhere. The assassin moved swiftly, its claws clicking softly against the floor as it pursued the heat signature. It rounded a corner and froze. A figure stood at the end of the corridor, barely visible in the faint glow of emergency lighting. Elena Voss. Sarek lunged, its blade slicing through the air with lethal precision. But as it struck, the figure dissolved into a holographic shimmer. Trap. Before Sarek could react, the walls erupted with noise. Hidden speakers blared a cacophony of sounds, roaring predators, screeching metal, and the unmistakable wail of a Drekker distress signal. Sarek's sensory systems overloaded, its claws scraping against the walls in a frantic attempt to steady itself as its head throbbed with the relentless dissonance. For the first time, doubt crept into the assassin's thoughts, its confidence shaken by the brutal, calculated assault on its senses. The dissonance was overwhelming, designed to confuse and disorient. Sarek's optical sensors flickered, struggling to process the conflicting stimuli. It staggered, its claws scraping against the walls as it tried to regain its bearings. And then it felt it, a sharp, searing pain as something struck its side. Not a blade but a projectile weapon. Crude by Drekker standards but effective. The assassin roared in fury, spinning to face its attacker. But there was no one there. Only shadows. "You should have stayed away," Elena's voice taunted, calm and steady. Sarek's mind raced. This wasn't a simple hunt. Elena Voss wasn't prey. She was a predator, and the base was her trap, meticulously designed with layers of misdirection and calculated chaos. Sarek realized this too late as every detail, the disorienting corridors, the assault on its senses, the precision of her counterattacks, revealed a mind that thrived on turning the hunter into the hunted. The assassin's confidence wavered for the first time in its career. Sarek had underestimated the human. And in the galaxy, underestimating a Deathworlder was a mistake that no one survived. Sarek staggered through the darkened corridors, its sensory system still reeling from the relentless assault. Each step felt heavier, the residual dissonance gnawing at its focus, while its claws dragged faintly against the cold, unyielding walls. The cacophony had subsided, but its echoes lingered in the assassin's mind like a phantom pain. Sarek's movements were slower now, its usual precision dulled by the lingering disorientation. It was uncharted territory for the Drekker assassin, a predator pushed to react rather than control. The base shifted subtly around Sarek, or so it seemed. The wall's angles were uneven, and the faint glow of emergency lighting cast jagged shadows that danced with every step. Sarek's claws brushed against the uneven surfaces, their sharp edges scraping softly as it navigated the disorienting space. Sarek's optical sensors flickered as it attempted to recalibrate, but the distortions persisted. It was a design meant to undermine any intruder's confidence and clarity. "Clever," Sarek muttered, its gravelly voice betraying a mix of grudging respect and simmering anger. The human's tactics were precise, relentless. Sarek had expected resistance, but this was something else entirely. This was personal. Another sound broke through the silence, a faint clatter, metallic and deliberate. Sarek froze, its claws tightening around the hilt of its plasma blade. It tracked the sound to a side corridor, its movements cautious now, wary of another trap. The air grew colder as Sarek advanced. The temperature dropped sharp enough to frost the edges of the metal walls. It scanned ahead, detecting faint heat signatures, but the readings were inconsistent. The corridor widened into a circular chamber, its center dominated by a raised platform covered in scorch marks and debris. Sarek's gaze darted across the room, its senses on high alert. And then it saw her. Elena Voss stepped into view from the far side of the chamber. She moved with deliberate ease, her posture relaxed but her eyes sharp. She held a weapon, a compact energy rifle, but made no immediate move to fire. Instead, she studied Sarek as if evaluating the assassin's every weakness. "You're persistent," she said, her voice calm and measured. "I'll give you that." Sarek straightened, drawing itself to its full height. Its mandibles clicked, a sound that often unsettled prey. "And you are arrogant," it growled. "You will die like all the others." Elena's lips twitched into a faint smile. "You think I'm like your other targets?" she asked. "I've studied you, Sarek. Your methods, your patterns. You rely on fear, precision, control." She took a step forward. "But you've never faced someone who thrives on chaos, have you?" Before Sarek could respond, Elena moved. Her movements were a blur, swift and unpredictable, leaving Sarek struggling to track her. The assassin's optical sensors recalibrated frantically, its claws twitching in frustration as it tried to anticipate her next move. She fired a single shot, not at Sarek but at the platform's edge. The energy bolt ricocheted, striking a hidden panel in the wall. The chamber's floor shifted instantly, sections dropping away to reveal a lattice of metal beams and a cavernous void below. Sarek leaped instinctively, its claws latching onto one of the beams as the ground beneath it vanished. The assassin's plasma blade fell, clattering into the depths. Sarek hissed in frustration, pulling itself up with deliberate strength. Elena stood on a stable section of the platform, her balance unwavering despite the sudden chaos. "How does it feel to be off balance?" she called out, her tone mocking but measured. Sarek didn't respond. It focused on climbing, its claws finding purchase on the slick beams. The assassin's mind raced, calculating angles and trajectories. This wasn't a fight, it was survival. And survival was something Sarek had mastered. Elena didn't wait. She moved again, darting toward a console embedded in the wall. Her fingers flew across the controls and the chamber responded. Beams shifted, walls folded inward, and vents released plumes of freezing gas that clouded the air. The environment was a weapon, one she wielded with surgical precision. Sarek reached the edge of a stable platform and hauled itself up. Its mandibles flared in a display of aggression, but its usual confidence was gone. "You cannot escape me," it snarled, its voice dripping with venom. Elena glanced back, her expression unreadable. "Escape," she echoed. "I'm not the one running." Another trap activated. A hidden turret emerged from the ceiling, swiveling toward Sarek. The assassin rolled to the side as it fired, narrowly avoiding a barrage of energy bolts. Sarek's claws scraped against the floor as it launched itself at the turret, tearing it apart in a flurry of sparks and shredded metal. The effort cost Sarek precious seconds. It turned back to the chamber, its optical sensors sweeping frantically, but only flickering shadows greeted its gaze. Elena had vanished, leaving behind an infuriating void where the chase should have continued. The chase continued through the labyrinthine base. Sarek moved with a predator's instinct, but the base's shifting architecture and Elena's relentless tactics kept it on edge. Every corridor held a new challenge: automated defenses, collapsing walls, even false heat signatures that led Sarek into dead ends. Each encounter left Sarek more frustrated, its mandibles twitching with barely contained fury as its claws gouged into the floor with every step. The realization of how thoroughly it had underestimated the human gnawed at its pride, the stronghold of reason and control in its mind faltering under the onslaught of relentless unpredictability. Elena wasn't just defending her base, she was dismantling Sarek's psyche, exploiting its strengths to unravel its confidence and resolve. At last, Sarek found itself in another chamber, this one larger and more ominous than the last. Its walls were lined with conduits that pulsed faintly with energy, casting an eerie glow. In the center stood another platform, but this one held a console surrounded by holographic displays. Elena's voice crackled through unseen speakers. "You're persistent," she said again, her tone tinged with both respect and derision. "But persistence only gets you so far." Sarek scanned the room, its claws flexing. It ignored the fatigue creeping into its limbs, the doubts gnawing at the edges of its mind. This was a game Sarek was determined to win, though every move seemed to push it further from control and closer to desperation. "You talk too much," Sarek growled. "Show yourself." The displays flickered, revealing Elena's face. She looked directly at Sarek, her expression cool and calculating. "You've already lost," she said simply. And with that, the room erupted in chaos. Conduits along the walls burst, showering the chamber in sparks and casting erratic shadows across Sarek's frame. Energy surges crackled through the air, and a deafening roar of collapsing machinery drowned out any coherent thought. Sarek braced itself, its claws digging into the floor, as the ground trembled under the force of the destruction. Sarek's claws scraped against the trembling floor as the chamber convulsed around it, vibrations rattling through its limbs and sending jolts of strain into its joints, forcing the assassin to fight against its own body for stability, a foreign and unsettling sensation. Sparks erupted from shattered conduits, and plumes of smoke filled the air, stinging the assassin's sensors. Sarek braced itself against the onslaught, its mind racing to adapt. The chaos that Elena Voss had unleashed was unlike anything it had faced before. It was an environment designed not to kill, but to disarm and disorient. As the floor stabilized, Sarek pushed forward, its limbs aching with the exertion of the prolonged hunt. The assassin had never known exhaustion in its career, but now its body felt heavy, its precision dulled by Elena's relentless strategies. The fortress of control Sarek had relied on for years was crumbling, piece by piece. The corridors ahead twisted unpredictably, the walls narrowing and expanding as if alive. Sarek adjusted its movements cautiously, its usual calculated pace giving way to reactive leaps and sudden stops, a stark contrast to its typical precision. Sarek found its usual calculated strategies faltering, the shifting environment forcing it to rely on instinct rather than precision, a disconcerting realization for the seasoned assassin. Elena's traps had grown more complex, more personal. Automated turrets now fired not in predictable bursts, but in erratic, shifting patterns that forced Sarek to move without its usual calculated grace. The assassin's frustration mounted with each near miss, its claws leaving gouges in the walls as it fought to maintain momentum. In a rare moment of reprieve, Sarek paused to recalibrate its sensors. The base's layout had shifted again, the map it had been building in its mind rendered useless. Sarek growled softly, a low, guttural sound of frustration. It knew Elena was watching, manipulating every element of the battlefield to her advantage. "You can't hide forever," Sarek muttered, its voice a rough growl. The words echoed through the corridor, swallowed by the hum of the base's shifting mechanisms. Elena's voice responded, crisp and unyielding from unseen speakers. "I'm not hiding, Sarek. I'm teaching you what it means to be hunted." The assassin's mandibles flared in defiance. It surged forward, pushing itself harder despite the strain. It was no longer a matter of the hunt, it was a matter of pride. Elena's words stung more than the traps themselves, a calculated effort to erode the assassin's resolve. The next chamber Sarek entered was cavernous, its ceiling lost in shadow. The floor was uneven, scattered with debris from what appeared to be a failed structural collapse. Sarek's optical sensors scanned the area, searching for heat signatures, but the air was cold and still. Too still. A faint sound drew its attention, a low, rhythmic tapping. Sarek froze, its claws twitching in anticipation. The sound echoed from every direction, disorienting and maddening. "Do you hear it?" Elena's voice broke through the stillness, calm yet taunting. "That's the sound of inevitability, Sarek. You're not in control here. You never were." Sarek's mandibles clicked angrily. It advanced cautiously, its claws scraping softly against the uneven ground. The tapping grew louder, more insistent, until it became a cacophony that filled the chamber. Sarek's optical sensors flickered again, struggling to stabilize against the overwhelming sensory input. A sudden flash of movement caught its attention. Sarek pivoted, its claws slicing through the air, but the target wasn't there. Another movement, a shadow darting along the walls. Sarek lunged, its speed betraying its desperation, but its strikes hit only empty air. Elena emerged from the shadows, her weapon raised, her posture calm and unyielding. Her eyes locked onto Sarek with a predator's focus, every movement radiating a calculated confidence that left no room for hesitation. This time she fired directly at Sarek, the energy bolt striking the assassin's shoulder with a blinding flash and a resonating crack that echoed through the chamber, leaving the air thick with the acrid scent of burnt flesh. Sarek roared, the pain sharp and immediate, but it refused to falter. It turned toward Elena, its claws flexing, ready to strike. Elena didn't retreat. She stood her ground, her gaze steady as she reloaded her weapon. "You're bleeding," she said simply, her voice devoid of mockery. "Not used to that, are you?" Sarek snarled, its claws gouging the ground as it charged. Elena moved with precision, her agility unmatched as she evaded the assassin's strikes. Each step was deliberate, calculated to draw Sarek deeper into the chamber. The ground beneath Sarek shifted suddenly, collapsing into a hidden pit. Sarek's limbs flared instinctively, claws scraping for purchase as its balance faltered. A guttural growl escaped it as the floor crumbled, sending it tumbling into the void below. Sarek leaped instinctively, its claws latching onto the edge of the pit as the rest of its body dangled precariously. Elena approached the edge, her weapon aimed directly at the assassin. "You're done, Sarek," she said, her tone firm but quiet. "This isn't your arena anymore. It's mine." For a moment, Sarek stared up at her, its mandibles twitching as it calculated its next move. But the exhaustion in its limbs and the weight of Elena's unrelenting tactics bore down on it like a crushing force. Elena's expression softened slightly, though her weapon remained steady. "You can walk away from this," she said. "Leave. Tell your employers you failed." Or you can stay and I'll end it here. Sarek's pride flared at her words, but even it couldn't ignore the truth in her tone. This wasn't a battle it could win, not here, not against her. With a low growl, Sarek released its grip, dropping into the pit below. The fall was harsh, its body striking the ground with a force that rattled its frame. As it struggled to rise, Sarek saw a faint tunnel leading away from the chamber. Elena had left it a path, a deliberate act of mercy. As Sarek limped through the tunnel, its mind churned with conflicting emotions. Pride clawed at its instincts, refusing to accept defeat, while shame gnawed at the edges of its resolve. For the first time in its career, Sarek faced a foe who unraveled its strengths with ruthless precision and an unsettling mastery of chaos. Yet, within the turmoil, there was a grudging respect for Elena Voss, a predator who had turned the hunt into a lesson Sarek would not soon forget. For the first time in its career, Sarek had been outmatched, not by brute force but by cunning and control. Elena's voice echoed one final time through the corridor, calm and unrelenting. Sarek paused mid-step, the weight of her words sinking into its already battered psyche. For a fleeting moment, its claws stilled, betraying the internal struggle of a predator forced to confront its own fallibility. Remember this, Sarek. Deathworlders aren't prey. We're survivors. And the next time you come for one of us, you'd better be ready to lose. Sarek said nothing. It simply moved forward, its claws scraping softly against the tunnel walls as it disappeared into the shadows. Sarek emerged from the tunnel into the open wilderness of the colony world. The biting winds howled like a predator, carrying sharp grains of sand that scoured its battered carapace, each gust a reminder of the unforgiving terrain. The harsh winds bit at its carapace, carrying with them fine grains of sand that scraped against its already battered frame. The sky was a turbulent mix of grays and blacks, mirroring the storm brewing in the assassin's mind. For the first time in its storied career, Sarek had retreated. Not tactically but in defeat. Its claws flexed reflexively, the faint ache in its joints a stark reminder of the physical toll Elena Voss had inflicted. Each step away from the underground labyrinth felt heavier than the last, as though the weight of its pride bore down on it with relentless force. Sarek's instincts screamed at it to return to reclaim its honor, but logic, a cornerstone of its species, held it back. Elena's parting words echoed in its mind, an indelible mark on its psyche. Deathworlders aren't prey. Sarek's mandibles twitched as the words echoed again, their simplicity cutting deeper than any weapon. It felt a foreign surge of vulnerability, as though it had been seen through completely and left exposed. The journey back to its hidden ship was a slow one. Sarek's injuries demanded caution, but the Real wound was internal. As the assassin ascended the ramp into the familiar confines of its vessel, it felt an unusual reluctance. The ship, once a symbol of triumph and efficiency, now felt hollow. It sealed the hatch behind it and activated the autopilot. The ship's engines roared to life, lifting it from the desolate surface. As the stars stretched into lines beyond the viewport, Sarek stared at the black void ahead. The galaxy had changed in ways it had not foreseen. For so long, Sarek and others of its kind had dismissed humanity as an aberration, a reckless, unpredictable species clinging to survival on a planet that should have destroyed them. But Elena Voss had rewritten that narrative. Humans weren't reckless. They were resilient, adaptable, and dangerously intelligent. Sarek accessed its mission log, staring at the incomplete file bearing Elena's name. The screen's faint glow reflected in its darkened eyes, illuminating the storm of conflict within. Pride warred with shame, each clawing at its psyche. For the first time, doubt slithered into the assassin's mind, whispering questions it had never entertained. Was failure truly unacceptable, or was it part of a lesson it had yet to understand? A single command hovered on the screen: confirm termination. Its claw hovered over the console, the hesitation uncharacteristic. A Drecker assassin did not fail, and it certainly did not leave loose ends. Yet the thought of falsifying the report felt equally unpalatable. Sarek snarled softly, retracting its claw. The log would remain incomplete for now. Meanwhile, far below on the colony world, Elena Voss stood at the edge of the pit Sarek had dropped into hours earlier. The faint marks of its claws were etched into the metal edge, a testament to its desperate struggle. She holstered her weapon, her gaze distant as she considered the implications of what had transpired. Humans had always been underestimated. When they first emerged on the galactic stage, their survival of a solar flare-induced ice age was dismissed as mere luck. Yet time and again they defied the odds, transforming chaos into opportunity and proving their resilience wasn't an accident but a defining trait. From the earliest days of galactic contact, other species had viewed them as anomalies, too fragile and emotional to thrive in the cold vastness of space. But Elena knew better. Survival wasn't just in their nature, it was their defining trait. Her comm unit buzzed softly. She tapped it and a familiar voice crackled through the line. "Status update?" "The Drekker's gone," Elena replied, her tone even. "It won't be coming back." Pause. "And you're sure it won't retaliate?" Elena's lips curved into a faint smile. "If it's smart, it won't." The voice on the other end sighed, a mixture of relief and lingering concern. "We'll ramp up defenses just in case." "You're a magnet for trouble, Voss." "Trouble finds me," she said lightly. "I just make sure it regrets the visit." She ended the call and turned back to the desolate horizon. The fight had been exhausting, but it was a reminder of why she continued to resist. Humanity's survival depended on more than just endurance. It required people willing to fight for the future, no matter the odds. In the depths of space, Sarek sat in the silence of its ship, replaying the events over and over in its mind. The Drekker prided themselves on their adaptability and superior logic, but Elena's chaos had unraveled them. For Sarek, it was more than a disruption. It was a dismantling of everything it believed unshakable. Her words had been simple, yet they carried a weight that Sarek couldn't shake. The assassin pulled up the galaxy's most recent strategic records, searching for information on humans. Files flooded its screen, detailing human history, their alliances, and their conflicts. What Sarek saw was a pattern, a species that thrived not in spite of adversity but because of it. They weren't just survivors, they were innovators turning their challenges into strengths. Sarek paused, claws hovering over the console. It had spent its life believing in the superiority of its kind, but now doubt crept in. If one human could outmatch it so thoroughly, what did that mean for the rest of them? On the colony world, the first rays of dawn pierced through the turbulent sky. Elena stood at the edge of the settlement, her silhouette framed by the faint glow. The scars of the battle were visible, but they were a badge of honor. She wasn't just fighting for survival, she was proving a point, one that Sarek had reluctantly begun to understand as it wrestled with the implications of their encounter. For humans, survival was never just about enduring, it was about reshaping the narrative one battle at a time. Humanity didn't just endure, it thrived. As she turned back to her base, a faint smile crossed her face. Sarek's retreat was more than a victory, it was a message. And Elena knew it wouldn't be the last time humanity sent one.